Okay, so pretty much over a year has gone by since my last review. Because, crap happens and technical difficulties and all that shit. But hey, all that's in the past. I'm back now, and I just gotta ask who's glad to see me?
Boo! You suck!
Glad to see you guys too. Anyway, now that I'm out of my pilot stage, I'd like to welcome you all to Dysfunctional Fiction, where we look at certain pieces of fiction, analyze them, and see what they're worth. And today, we're gonna once again, surprise, surprise, discuss and review another webcomic. And let me just take a moment to tell you guys, yeah, webcomics are gonna be my main thing for a while. I am gonna branch out to other genres of fiction soon, but right now you're gonna see a lot of webcomic reviews. And my reason behind doing this is simple. We have an entire underappreciated subgenre of art and entertainment that's just waiting to be brought into the light. There are way too many good stories with way too much good work put into them to not be talked about. And honestly, whether or not I think a webcomic story is good or bad or not, I still think it deserves some recognition for the effort. Which is exactly why today I feel like I should review a webcomic story that's sort of drifting in between those two qualities. You know, a story that I'm kind of on the fence about. Since today is a really special occasion, I guess reintroductions is in order. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Henry Volk, hotshot internet smartass. And today, I bring you Snarlbear. Time to ride the lightning.
Oh, we're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And here he is, the Wizard of Wiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever, oh, ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Okay, so let's get down to business here. Snarlbear is a fantasy story, which is cool because God knows I love fantasy. Exploring new and extraordinary worlds, while at the same time you're encountering exotic imaginary creatures, and also at the same time meeting new fascinating characters. All that just strikes a chord with me. So when I came across Snarlbear, I was completely and utterly underwhelmed. Okay, now let me explain. First off, recap. The story starts with a girl named Daisy, who spends her time daydreaming and fantasizing about having a great mystical adventure. She does, however, get her wish, though, when one day, when she's riding on her bike from work, she just stumbles upon a magical pathway down a random street alley that leads into another world called the Rainbow Dimension. In this world, she makes new and interesting friends and encounters dangerous creatures and wicked villains. So, in order to survive this new world, she quickly learns how to fight and defends herself while slaying countless monsters and becomes so strong she's even given the name Snarlbear. So, to just sum up my thoughts about this, the story isn't bad, like not at all, but it isn't really all that good either. When it comes to the story, there are a few things I find that just nearly breaks my suspension of disbelief. But that's just a little bit of the beginning of the story. What I'm referring to is stuff such as the main character just stumbling upon a portal into another universe for no other reason than just because. And yeah, maybe that is just me being skeptical and asking a little bit too much. But then again, not really. I just feel like the story moves a little bit too quickly at the beginning, almost to the point that it feels a little bit rushed. Like, it feels as if everything that's relevant in the first chapter happens in the span of, like, give or take 7 pages. Like, it starts with her getting off of work, then she's fighting a life and death battle in the middle of a mystic forest out in the middle of nowhere. I just feel like there's very little transition to it. Though, to be honest, I can make a bet that this isn't the first time, like, it's been done like this. Just not as abruptly. Sure, though, the only two fantasy stories I can think of that got away with something like this would be Alice in Wonderland and Narnia. But the thing is, they can get away with it because, well, with Narnia, it didn't at least sweep it under the rug without addressing it first and again later on. And with Alice in Wonderland, it at least made sense when it all came full circle. But with this, it just feels like the story rushed through its own prologue. But fortunately, only the first chapter has a problem like this. And to be honest, I'm glad that they're just trying to move the first part of the story along and they're not just trying to rush through the entire story. But the problem is still there, though. If it wasn't for that, the only other real problem the story would have is the fact that the story didn't really follow an exact narrative until a full cast was introduced, which isn't really a huge issue because it doesn't take that long to get to that point. So from that point on, the story improves, but not by a large amount that it doesn't feel like it's falling into the same trope as The Hobbit or any other fantasy story we've seen before. In short, the variety of the story isn't mediocre, but it isn't anything new. It's just kind of basic. Okay, moving on. Then there's the cast itself. There are pretty much like four names worth mentioning. Yeah, how about we start off with our extremely violent protagonist here, Daisy Snarlbear. When she isn't brutally tearing something apart, she's cosplaying as Braveheart. Snarlbear seems to be greatly made out to be some kind of hero. But the thing is, at times it seems like that's clearly not the case. She strikes me more as some sort of thrill seeker who thinks with her fist more than with her actual head, and whose first instinct is to punch it first and ask questions freaking never. I mean, for Christ's sake, I feel like some of the bad situations she gets into is mostly self-inflicted, especially when it comes to the situations that could be easily solved by sitting down and talking it out. But no, no, she knows no chill, like at all. It's just that sometimes it seems like she can be more vicious than the monsters she fights and kills. But then again, as one-dimensional as I see her thug-like nature to be, it kind of fits well with the story due to a certain part of the mythos of the Rainbow Dimension. You see, in the Rainbow Dimension, the longer you inhabit it, the more you start to become something you shouldn't, something more savage or monstrous, which explains the shift of personality from a quiet, awkward store clerk to a brutal, monster slaying beast of a woman. It's an obvious change that you slowly start to see throughout the story. Though, one thing it doesn't explain is how Snarlbear is so naturally gifted at fighting and killing monsters without any training and is able to get better at it by the day. It all just seems Mary Sue-esque to me. Let's move on to some other characters, shall we? Next in line, we have Flint, the con artist elf. Besides looking like a less impressive version of Edward, there isn't a lot to talk about when it comes to Flint. He serves the role of the buddy sidekick to Daisy Snarlbear, after being the first person she talks to after coming to the Rainbow Dimension. If I were to describe his personality, he would be the con man with a heart of gold. Right off the bat from when he makes his first appearance, he comes off as transparently shady as possible. And when it comes to his motives, money pretty much plays a huge priority in a lot of them. As for some of his redeeming qualities, I think they come from his soft spot for Snarl, mostly because she's his only friend due to him cutting off connections with anybody else. Mainly because of an untouched part of his past that I was hoping that the story would address, but it hasn't. Which is disappointing because besides that, there's not a lot to Flint to write home about. In a short summary, Flint is Snarlbear's right-hand man, who isn't really all that trustworthy since he puts money and his own survival on a higher priority than most other things. But you can trust him enough to put friendship at a higher priority than those two. Now, before we get to these last two on the list, let me just share a secret with you. Unicorns are fucking psychotic.
You steaks were goily, huh?
Anyway, next up we have Prince Narcisco Inigo Floflem III, or Narcy for short. You know what? Yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna call him Narcy. Anyway, Narcy here is kind of the saving grace to this story. But it's not that it's because he's like the coolest guy ever. I mean, I guess he's kind of cool, but not that much. Actually, not really. The reason why he's so important is because when he's introduced to the story, a proper narrative follows with him. Prince Narcisco is a banished prince from a unicorn kingdom that rules most of the Rainbow Dimension. He was cursed to look like a human and was banished due to a heinous crime he was accused of doing by his power-hungry sister, Princess or Queen Cassie, who also seems to be driving their kingdom into madness. So he enlists the help of Snarlbear and Flint in order to find a mystical artifact and gain enough power to bring order back to his kingdom. Narcisco's role in the story is a really vital one when it comes to the plot, but as a character, though, he doesn't stand out all that much. I guess there is his selfless need and drive to want to save his sister from a somewhat corrupting force, just as much as he wants to save his kingdom. That, I guess, can be counted as noble. Either way, Narcisco's role in the story fleshes out the plot and gives us a proper main villain, and an end goal destination. So Narcisco is, without a doubt, the best addition to the story. And as for his sister, how do you pronounce her name again? Oh, here we go. Queen Cassiopeia. Oh no. Fuck that. I ain't pronouncing that. Gonna call her Cassie instead. Cassie here plays the role of the main villain for a real significant part of the story. Her deal is that she's trying to have her brother killed off so she can have full control over their kingdom. Originally, there's supposed to be a tradition that says that the two siblings of the royal family are supposed to fight to the death over the throne. Narcisco, being reasonable and not bloodthirsty, didn't feel the need to kill his sister. He'd rather share the power and the throne. But honestly, if you ask me, I don't see anything wrong with this plan. I mean, when has the idea of having your entire kingdom's political system revolve around a family dispute between siblings ever gone wrong.
It doesn't belong in the budget plan, Luna.
Well, how else am I supposed to get you to dress as a banana? You have refused to be open to negotiations.
Luna, we have 2 weeks to agree on a proper budget.
You should have dressed as a banana's last year! I'm Nightmare Moon! Nightmare Moon!
Cassie, on the other hand, obviously doesn't agree with him. For a good portion of the story, Cassiopeia is power-hungry, malicious, and all-around sadistic. Almost to a point where she's willing to slaughter an entire town just on a whim. And you know what? I'm not gonna lie. That's a good start when you're trying to make a threatening villain where their contrast is that they're a fucking unicorn. Because let me tell you something right here and now. Never in my life have I felt even more afraid of a mystical pink crystal horse before as I do now. I mean, it almost gets to a point where you think that, like, she's possessed or something. Oh, wait, but then you find out that's actually the case. Yeah, I think that is the one gripe I have with her character. When we find out that her actions of her being a merciless and bloodthirsty ruler is all due to an unnatural influence produced from her recently developed crystal powers. I just feel like that reduces her villain status a bit. When you do something like that, it kind of just makes a character a victim of circumstance. I guess you can still argue that the character's actions were still their own, but I think it's all just a setup to put them in a redeemable villain role, which isn't really all that bad a thing. But I don't know. I guess I was just expecting them to commit to the villain role with this character. You know, instead of immediately converting her to good after the first time they defeat her, and then putting her in a position where she's straight up cleared of all charges of every person she's possibly murdered. But hey, that's just me rambling on about my opinion. Yeah, whatever. Okay, time for the one thing that made the biggest impression on me, the art. And when I say it stands out to me, I say that with somewhat mixed emotions because that's not entirely a good thing in this case. Without a doubt in my mind, the art sometimes can be breathtakingly gorgeous, but that only happens when the story wants you to draw focus on a picture or a scene that they want you to be amazed by. Kind of like when one of the characters are having somewhat of a transformation. Either way, you can see the hard work and dedication alongside the attention to detail right there in the art. But needless to say, it doesn't necessarily always show. But just like every other webcomic out there that's been around for a while, this comic also has made some different changes and improvements for the last 4 years it's been around. One of these so-called changes, which I see to be a major improvement, would be the change of character design of the main character, taking away her frail, small demeanor and giving her a more buff and rougher look. Having her become more bulky is a good change in her development, considering she's spending God knows how much time in another dimension manhandling monsters every day. So yeah, there are good things I can say about the art. Selectively, though. And on the other hand, there are things about the art I can't ignore. Things that come off to be a constant problem. What I'm referring to right now is the elephant in the room. You know, the huge ass, neon lit, rainbow colored elephant in the room. Yeah, I'm talking about the variety of colors used in this comic. There can be way too many colors put in one page alone. True, though, I will admit the theme of it being colorful would make sense considering this adventure takes place in a world called the Rainbow Dimension. And it wouldn't be fair if I said that there wasn't times they used the coloring to set the tone properly, which is a nice touch. Like, there are moments where there are scenes that have like an aura of dread in it, and the entire scene would turn to the color of gray to fit the tension that's in the air. And then there are moments during a fight scene where colors can be sporadic and all over the place, kind of just like the fight scenes. So they take the color motif and they run with it, which is kind of good, but still, most of the time it feels like they just overdo it way too much. Maybe they just stick with one or two colors at a time and be more visually appealing, but they just use way too many colors at a time and it just clashes with itself. I mean, for Christ's sake, look at this. It's like staring down the closet of a colorblind pimp's wardrobe.
Ah, my eyes! Oh, the colors! Oh, they're so bright! Oh, jeez! Whoa! My Disney's eyebrow! It's so bright!
You know what? Thinking about it, we don't really complain about the amount of colors used when we read a Dr. Seuss book now, do we? But then again, on the other hand, this ain't Dr. Seuss, is it? But anyway, getting back on topic, there is one other thing that needs to be said about the art, and that would involve the fight scenes. Yeah, the thing is, they're not all that good, like, at all, which is a real problem considering this entire story consists of an adventure where the main character is always fighting something or someone. Now, there's one thing that's obvious. It's that drawing a fight scene is not easy. And I'm no expert at drawing well choreographed fights, but from an observational standpoint, it's kind of hard to ignore the issues with this comic's action. Let's list off some of these problems. One is that some of the movements don't connect at all when they're being executed, which kind of makes them feel sort of out of place when you're reading through them. Certain actions that happen in a fight kind of happen randomly because the panels don't match up. Like, there are some frames where you can't tell whether a character is, rushing forward to attack someone or jumping forward from above. And then there are moments when a character is just running up to punch someone in the face, and then in the next panel, they're just power bombing them through a boulder. Or they're just throwing a boulder onto their head. Again, I can't tell. Oh, then there's the other thing that's wrong with the fights. Most of the time, they end on a very unsatisfying climax. Like, it'll probably end in one huge strike or kick, which will come off as either stiff and stale or flimsy and weak. If action is one of your biggest selling points in your comic, and the fight scenes in said comic come up short, then you got to admit that there might be a problem. All in all, when it comes to Snarlbear and my overall opinion and final impressions on it, it isn't bad, like, not at all, but it's also not all that amazing. It's just on a level where it's kind of subpar. And honestly, it doesn't really do that much of a good job standing out from other basic fantasy stories, considering it falls into the same tropes. And what I'm referring to when I say that is that a good crucial part of the story turns into a get from point A to point B journey that feels kind of brief because of the lack of adventure. After the cast gets its main objective,
they complete it very quickly. They embark on this adventure to find a mystical artifact to defeat this great evil ruler and get into like maybe 1 or 2 fights along the way. Then they find what they're looking for, and then it's time for the final confrontation. And since it's so brief, we don't have that much time to explore the world of the Rainbow Dimension or its lore, or flesh out the characters. And believe me, these characters needed the fleshing out. And like I said before, the plot and narrative isn't really all that there at first. But when it does come along, the story does a good enough job of following it well enough to keep your attention long enough so you can speed read through it for about 1 or 2 hours tops. If the objective behind making this comic was to make a somewhat basic fantasy story with a simple formula, then I have to give it to the author of this book, Natalie Rees. She did a somewhat decent job. But hey, if I were to give them some advice, besides the fact nobody fucking asked, I would tell them that next time you're looking to make a fantasy story, make sure you expand on the plot. And also, please, take it easy on the coloring next time. And done. Man, that felt good. I felt like I made some improvement this time around. Still, there was some things I could do better. I'll work on it, but man, I feel like I can get back in the game now. Matter of fact, let's not waste any time. What else is there to review? How much work have I left piled up? That's not so bad. Oh wait, no, there's more. A lot more. Oh, shit.